Are you thinking about moving to Morocco? In this video, I sit down with Mohammad Arshad for a full breakdown. Cost of living, rent, utilities, visas, renewals, and what life is really like on the ground. If you've been curious about Morocco as your next destination, this interview is packed with the answers you're looking for. Let's get into it. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Morocco and why you chose Morocco, because of course I met you in Turkey, and there was a lot of brothers in Turkey, and it was some good camaraderie and good brotherhood going on in Turkey. Can you start there? Like, why are you now in Morocco? Why did you leave Turkey?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. Initially, my plan all along was to actually go to Morocco because my wife is half Moroccan. So my plan was like, when we leave the UK, it makes natural sense to go to a country where you have family and where you kind of know it and stuff. So my intention originally was to go to Morocco. The only other place I have family is probably France and Pakistan, and they don't really count for places that I kind of want to live. So what happened is we were intending to go to Morocco, but COVID hit. So I think it was like 2019, 2020, something along those lines. And Morocco actually closed its borders fully. So they wouldn't allow anyone in at all. And what that meant is my wife and kids could go, but I wouldn't be able to actually go. So instead, we just decided, like, where can we go, which is open and available, like a Muslim country we can kind of go to. And we ended up going to Turkey. And alhamdulillah, we went there. We fell in love with it. It was really, really great. And we had a really great time. I ended up living there for about 3 years in a city called Bursa. And it was a really good experience. But I think deep down, like I said, we always had the intention to move to Morocco. And I think Morocco is one of those places which it should be top of the list. If anyone's thinking of making Hijrah, I definitely think it should be top of the list or close to the top of the list. And that's for a number of reasons. Like you mentioned, the close proximity to the UK, to the US, from the places that we move, Europe, all these kind of places, it's really good from that perspective. It's really good from the perspective of some things that maybe Turkey didn't have, which I felt Morocco's a lot stronger in. For example, Turkey seems and feels very secular. And I think that Morocco definitely has more of an Islamic feel. It's also the Arab culture and these kind of things, but Morocco hasn't been through secularization in the same way that Turkey has. And sometimes you can be in places in Turkey and you just feel like you're just in the West, as opposed to Morocco, where it really does feel like you're in a Muslim country, you're in an Islamic kind of environment. So I think both countries have their pros and cons. But for us, we wanted a place where we have family, somewhere where the climate is really, really good, and somewhere where you kind of feel at home and you feel comfortable.
Mashallah. So what city are you living in actually in Morocco
So
right
I'm
now?
living in Tangier, which is basically at the tip of Morocco, touching Spain. Like when I go to the beach, I can actually see Spain from the beach.
Right. Is there a reason why you chose Tangier opposed to other places?
Initially, I wanted to live in Marrakesh, right? Because when I lived in Turkey, I lived in Bursa, which is a slightly smaller city than Istanbul, for example. And I just felt
Right.
like, for example, going from my house to the airport was like an hour and a half if I was going to Sabiha. And if I was going to Istanbul, it's
Right.
like 2.5 hours. So when I was
Right.
picking people up, all this, I was like, this is a bit long. So I thought, when I move this time, I want to go to like a major city. So I said, right,
Right.
let's go, let's check out Marrakesh. So I went to Marrakesh and I actually did a good thing, alhamdulillah. I picked June to go there. And in June, it was baking. I'm talking like 45, 50-degree heat, something along those lines, right? I just walked outside and I was like, this is insane. Like, I personally, I don't like the heat. In Turkey, we had an amazing climate. I lived on a foot of a mountain, really, really good. But I couldn't handle the heat. And I said, like, I don't want to live in this kind of level of heat. And this is one of the reasons why, by the way, I put off Dubai, UAE, all these kind of places in the Gulf, which I feel are really good potentials as well. The climate really put me off all of these places. And I know people say, like, you're in AC and you're in the AC car. Yeah, but the truth is, like, sometimes you're gonna have to walk to the masjid at the whole time, right? And it's gonna be baking, it's gonna be murder, right? And same, you're going to get a haircut, pick up some groceries. It's just not a nice environment to be in during the day. So that's what actually just put me off Marrakesh. And then when I looked at the other cities, Tangier was just like really, really good in terms of, like, everyone in Morocco kind of wants to live in Tangier. It's like it's the northern part of the country, so the temperature is much better here the whole year round. I've never lived in a climate like this where the temperature is so good, alhamdulillah. And then on one side you've got the Atlantic Ocean, the other side you've got the Mediterranean Sea. Right now I live 12 minutes from the airport, which is exactly the kind of like space I wanted. I live about 15 minutes from the beach, alhamdulillah. So it's a really nice environment, but it's also quiet. It doesn't have that rush. A lot of people would have probably been to Marrakesh and all these kind of places. It doesn't have that craziness. It doesn't have that tourism vibe. And it's just very nice. It's very modern, and it has a really good infrastructure.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. So, I mean, how would you compare the cost of living in Turkey to Tangier in Morocco?
This is very interesting because I think the time that I left, there was inflation going on. Now, when I was initially in Turkey, I had, I think, probably the greatest deal that you can get, alhamdulillah, from a moving perspective. Because I moved in during COVID, the places where I was staying, the hotels were empty, the places had nowhere, and they were actually doing Airbnb letting. But because of COVID, no one came. So I came in and negotiated a really good deal with them, alhamdulillah, in terms of rent. And then what would happen is, as you know, the pound would get stronger and the lira would get weaker. So every month, my rent would actually go down, right? Like the cost of my living would go down. So it's really good for that period. Now, I've heard since I've left, the cost of living has gone up a lot and a lot and a lot. I think like rental, for example, probably nowadays, I would say it's very similar. A lot of this depends on where you live. I always say to people, there are cities in Turkey which are much better than Morocco. For example, Başakşehir might be a really, really good place to live in Turkey, and it might be better than parts of Morocco. But then there's parts of Morocco, cities here, for example, Tangier, which might be much better than other cities in Turkey. So I think you have to compare it like that. The cost of living, I would say, like in terms of rental, accommodation, all that kind of stuff, I think it's quite similar in these places. I think where it differs is that I feel Morocco is more expensive when it comes to other things. So for example, the internet is more expensive here. The electricity is more expensive here. The water is more expensive here. Gas is actually very cheap. And then I think the other thing I would say is that food generally is definitely more expensive here. What you'll find with Turkey is that they're really good at producing things in-house. So a lot of the everyday items, whether it's biscuits or little things here and there, they will produce them in-house. And therefore, it's quite cheap locally. We actually have, in Morocco, we have BIM, for example. BIM is a Turkish supermarket which produce most of their own stuff. So you imagine that they're importing that stuff here. So it's going to be at a premium. So generally, I would say the cost of food is quite high in Morocco. I think people would be surprised just on their monthly living and stuff. Of course, if you just buy vegetables, there's some vegetables which are very good priced, and especially when they're in season. But generally, I would say the cost of living probably is a little bit higher here than Turkey.
Let's help people understand. So let's compare it now with UK prices. Let's say the British pound. If you're looking for a decent area in, let's say, Tangier, going from, let's say, a 2-bedroom up into villa, what ranges are we looking at in British pounds price-wise?
So I think what you'll find is that the range is absolutely huge. Okay, you can find really, really cheap accommodation here. I'm talking like maybe £200. And then you can find accommodation which goes all the way up to, like, I've seen villas at like and really nice compounds and stuff for like £1,500, £2,000. So it goes the whole way. But I would say on average, like the actual compound that I live in is more expensive than most of the compounds surrounding it, because it is full of basically Muslims who've been born and raised in France, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, UK. Like everyone in this compound, they're all like, a lot of them are like practicing people, alhamdulillah, who have all just moved from the West, right? So because of that, the compound has this kind of thing where it's like a bit more pricey. But you can find apartments here for £300 to £400, 3-bedroom apartments. As you go higher in the building, so ground floor is the cheapest. As you go higher, it'll be more expensive. So if you have a flat at the top, that will be a lot more expensive. But generally, like £300-400 in a compound like this. And I think if you were to see the play area that we have in our compound, it's probably the biggest I've ever seen in a compound. So it's a really nice centralized play area where you look out and you just see this massive playground and the kids are playing there. And I feel very safe, alhamdulillah, like sending my kids out alone. I just kick them out of the house. There's an Arabic teacher who is in the compound, so they go to see her and they just walk there themselves, come back themselves. So because of that, we have security the whole way around and everything. So that's like £300-400. But if you wanted to live villa life, you could live it for like £1,000. And then if you go to extreme, like a really, really nice villa in an amazing area, 1,500, 2,000. But I think most people are probably living here very comfortably on like £300-400 in terms of rent.
To get your Hijrah related books, go to book.makehijrah.com. MashaAllah, man. So I noticed something in Turkey, in Malaysia. you have this family friendly, regardless of what compound you're in. It can be a poor compound, it can be a well-off compound, but all the compounds have facilities for children, like swings and slides and areas for them to play. And then some places don't have it. You'll be hard pressed to find it. So is Morocco like that? Is this just your compound, or is it all compounds have these little playgrounds and things for children?
So I think that a lot of the compounds I've seen, they don't really have play areas like that. They're not great at that. I think what they'll do, especially some of the smaller compounds, is they'll have buildings around, maybe a swimming pool or something, or they'll have a small area. I think the one I'm in is actually quite unique, and this is the reason why I chose it. So I think the play areas are not that huge. But there are different parks and other things that are there publicly, but I don't think a huge amount of the compounds have a massive play area. Some of them do have play areas for sure, but a lot of them will have like swimming pools just around them and that. And I think the other thing is that the infrastructure around here is probably not as advanced in Turkey when it comes to building compounds and all these kind of things. I think it's different in different cities. So for example, I went Rabat, and Rabat is the capital of Morocco. Very beautiful city, extremely clean. Like Morocco generally is very clean, just like Turkey. But Rabat is very, very clean. It's where the king lives. So it's like security, like every single major roundabout, you'll see police there, and it's very safe, all those kind of things. And then the accommodation there is like a lot more expensive. But when I went there, I kind of saw the buildings and I saw the compounds, and they had swimming pools, they had small play areas. And it reminded me of Turkey, of the way Turkey has all these different kind of compounds and stuff. So I do think it depends on the cities that you live in terms of the compounds and the costs and stuff.
You mentioned that the electric and the water is about the same, or could be more expensive than Turkey. So what are we looking at for the utilities there?
I'll give you an example with electricity, right? I felt like Turkey electricity was really cheap. Like me, I don't like the heat. So in the winter, I was actually just like literally running like 2 ACs the whole time. I'm talking day, night, everything, all of this kind of stuff, right? And my bill went from like, I don't know, £27 to like maybe £80 or something, right? So you can see, like, to run ACs the whole time and electricity fall and do whatever you want, all that stuff, £78 nothing. And here, when I came here, I found that we weren't really doing much. Maybe we were running the dryer or the iron or whatever. And the cost was like, at a low level, it's like £80, £90. But on a high level, so like, one of my friends here, he's got an AC, he's got this, he's got that. He was saying the bills can go to £150, £200. That's electricity, right? And then in water, like in Turkey, every time my water bill was like ridiculous. It was like £6, £7, £9, that kind of. Right. And I would say here it's still reasonably priced, so it's not a huge amount, but it'll always be like £15-20, all those kind of prices. So there is a difference between them, but gas is very cheap. So since I've been here, it's been nearly a year. I probably spent a few months abroad, by the way. But in all that time, I've had one gas cylinder, and that's been running my stove the whole time. And that one gas cylinder, you could say I replaced it once in 1 year. That cost £4. So gas is very cheap. Like, you imagine paying £4 for your stove for the whole year, right? Free, basically. And in Turkey, it wasn't like that. But again, this is what I mean by infrastructure. In Turkey, we had radiators which would warm the house, just like we have in the UK. So you're familiar with the UK, we have a central heating system. It warms the water. It does the whole heating of the whole house and stuff. You had those kind of things that they don't have here. But if you did have that here, gas is extremely cheap, and that could be run really, really well.
Do you need heaters there?
So this is a bit of a technical one, because like I said, Tangier is a very strange place in the sense that most houses here, I would say 95% of houses do not have ACs, right? Because when it gets hot, it gets to about 30, 35 degrees. And people are like, you open the windows, it's kind of bearable, they're okay with it, right? When it gets cold right now, for example, like I check the temperature sometimes, and it's like, 10, 12 degrees, but it feels colder because we have a huge wind that comes from the ocean, obviously. And then I live quite high up as well. So there's a lot of wind. So generally it does feel quite cold at night and in the evenings when the sun's not out. So with that kind of thing, I think it's like, depending upon your family and stuff, you might need heaters. So we have some like those kind of electric heaters that you put on and stuff. We've usually put hoodies and all this stuff on as well in the winter. And there's like 3-4 months. I just came back from London. I spent a few weeks there. And in London, it was much colder than here. Much colder. But when I came here, I felt very cold in the house, because in London we're running the central heating full time. It's like really hot house. Literally, I used to sweat in London because it was so hot at night and stuff, right? But here it's like very cold because we don't have the central heating that we do in other places.
It sounds good, and the prices are really reasonable. Even if you say for a big villa, £2,000 or something like that, people are paying that for in New York City. They're paying that for a studio.
Yeah, studio 2-bed, exactly.
A small studio. So those are great prices, mashallah. So now the big question is, how can I get in? How can I get into the country, visa, immigration wise, and then how can I stay in the country?
So I just want to add one more thing before we get into that, right? Which is,
okay,
when I was making this decision to move between Turkey and Morocco, when I weighed things up, I kind of felt like it was a bit of a Dunya versus Akhirah decision. Okay. And the reason I'm saying that is from a Dunya perspective, I felt like Turkey was a really good place to be, right? Like my kids used to do ice skating, we used to do horse riding, and just like I used to go to the gun range and do all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And just as a lifestyle thing, I thought it was great. Like we used to go to beaches, resorts, all this stuff, really good. Their resorts are much more, developed and everything. But when it came to Morocco, it was all the other stuff. So when it came to, for example, the fact that there are no shops that sell alcohol here, the fact that when it comes to Ramadan, it's not like Turkey where people are just eating freely and you don't see people eating food, right? You don't have that kind of secular stuff. Like a lot of women, for example, here, like a huge amount of them will wear hijab compared to other places like Turkey and all this kind of stuff. And then when it came to Ramadan, I didn't really enjoy Ramadan in Turkey for a number of reasons. When it came to Ramadan and Salah and the masjids and all this kind of stuff, I felt like the whole Islamic vibe was much stronger here. And I think like when I used to go to my local masjid in Turkey, it would be like old men. Like my friends were old Turkish men, right? Because there weren't many young people. And I think Bashar Shahir is very unique and it's really good in that sense. But most of the massages I went to in Turkey, it was just like old men most of the time. In Morocco, I see the opposite. I see like people of all ages praying. I see kids in the masjid. I see people praying on the streets. I see people reading Quran just here and there. So I think like there's a difference in the vibe. And I'm not saying you can't find that in Turkey. It's definitely there in Turkey in different places as well. But just Morocco as a holistic thing, it really feels like that, right? And this is why I'm saying that although I love the infrastructure in that country and everything, I think that, depending upon what you want, and I think this is what it comes down to. Like I was speaking to my wife about Morocco, Turkey, and she was saying the same thing I always say. It really depends what you're looking for. It really depends what kind of transition you're looking to make. In terms of the actual visa, all this kind of stuff, as a British passport holder, it's actually been really, really good for me. And I think that one of the big concerns about Turkey, in addition to the things I mentioned, was actually the visa situation, right? So, the situation where a few years ago, like COVID time when I went there, I applied for the visa. I did it all myself. It was in Turkish. I got translated. I did everything. And they gave me 2 years. No problem. No questions asked. Right. And it was just like that, where every time we would go, they renew it for a year. It was fine. And all of that was good. But then after a while, they started changing their positions. They started reducing the amounts, even to the point where I heard people have properties that couldn't get visas. So visa was a really big thing on our mind. Like we were like, we don't want to be in a country where suddenly, like one of the brothers was saying, he got told recently, he got 10 days to leave the country, right? Moving country is hard. I've done it 2 times now. And, I don't want to be in a position where 10 days you have to leave the country. So that was always on our mind, like the whole visa thing and the pressure of the visa and everything. Even though I was very positive, I was like, look, alhamdulillah, like we're earning money and we're here, we can show bank accounts and stuff. I don't think they're really going to refuse our visa. And a lot of my friends who live in Turkey, they haven't actually been refused and gone out. But this was one big concern for us. And so when we thought about Morocco, obviously my wife is half Moroccan. And because of that, the children automatically are Moroccan. So they, technically, the 3 of them, they can live here as long as they want. No problem, nothing at all, right? So that is obviously a big comforting factor. The second thing is that Turkey and Morocco are very different, because what happens in Turkey is that as a British person or maybe an American or someone, well, actually they didn't have this till America till later, but you can fly into Turkey, you can go there and you can stay there 3 months, no problem, and then you have to leave. Or you can fly in there in any 6-month period, but you can't stay longer than 3 months. So what that means is that once you go there for a certain amount of time, you have to be away from there for at least 3 months or whatever as well. Right. Now, with Morocco, it's actually the opposite. It's a bit like the UAE, where people used to do border runs and stuff. You get 90 days when you come here. If you're from the UK or some form of a Western country, mostly, you get 90 days. Okay. Now, the great thing is that the day you exit, you can return on the same day and get 90 days more.
Mashallah. No.
Right. So there is no issue with you just living here perpetually without even the visa and stuff. You can just do that if you have the right type of passport. Someone like myself, alhamdulillah, like I travel a lot, and I traveled, probably like every 2-3 months anyway. So for me, like every 2-3 months, I'm out anyway. So it gets stamped, I come back in, it's done, it's finished, it's really good, right? But sometimes you might not be able to do that. And then this is the reason, by the way, that I stayed in Tangier as well. This is another reason, because a lot of people might not know this, but as part of the Moroccan mainland, there are 2 little enclaves which are actually part of Spain.
Right, I heard about this.
So you got Septa and you got Melilla, I think it's called. And these 2 places sit on the Moroccan mainland, but they are actually technically part of Spain. That place is 1 hour, 20 minutes from my house, right? So what happens is when my 90 days are about to run out, I basically go straight to that place. I park my car up, I go in, I get my passport stamped, I go into Spain, I walk into Spain for 1 minute, I walk back around, and I come back in, and I've got another 90 days. So technically, if I never left the country, I would probably need to do 4 of those border runs in a year, which again is not bad at all. But if I'm leaving the country, like I just came back from the UK now, I don't need to do a border run. And I'm going to probably leave. I'm going to go to Pakistan sometime later, inshallah. So I won't need to do that run now anyway. And then when I come back, I'll get 3 months. So if you have a Western passport, you are entitled to do this. But there's brothers and sisters who live in Marrakesh. So Marrakesh is about 6 hours away from here. So for them, it might be a bit of a headache, right? Like you got to do a 6-hour thing here, and then you got to go to there, and then you got to come back. You might want to book a hotel, this and that. But the great thing is that flights are really cheap. And this is another thing that I've got to say is above and beyond Turkey, because Turkey was really good. This is one of the reasons I don't live in Pakistan, by the way. Pakistan has a lot of issues, but I would love to live there. But it's just so far from the UK. I'm talking like 7-hour flight or whatever, right? But more important is the cost. The cost is crazy. Like I'm looking at flights now. It's like, £700, £800, £900 to go there, return. In Turkey, me as a family, 4 of us, we would fly to the UK for like £800, £900, £1,000. All 4 of us, right? So you're talking about £200, something like that, for a family each to fly back and forth, which is really, really good price, right? And that way we were still coming back to London every 3, 4, 5 months. We were coming back and going.
To get your consultation from people on the ground in the Muslim world, go to consultation.makehijrah.com.
Now in Morocco, it's even better. It's even better. First of all, it's a shorter flight. Like the other day, when I came back, we were in the air for 2.5 hours. That's it, right? So really, really close to the UK. And then on top of that, like my business partner and his friend, they came to visit me last year. They paid £35 each, right? So you imagine £35, that's like $50, right? To go from UK to Tangier, return, without any luggage, right? So even that, if you live in Marrakesh and you're like, okay, I want to live here, but to renew my visa, I'm just going to book a flight every 3 months to just go in and out of another country, whichever is cheapest, that would do the same thing as well.
Are there any other options? Because like, let's say you have 8 children and it's just difficult to just pick up everybody every few months. Maybe in the beginning you're excited and you know, but then later it starts to become a burden. Are there any long-term options?
Yeah, there's definitely options, and you can actually get residency like you can in other countries, as a visitor, as a tourist, all these kind of things. So definitely you can do all of that. You go through the process. There are requirements. For example, sometimes they say like you might need £10,000 in the bank so that they can actually see that you have enough funds to live here and stuff. Some people say you could get away with £5,000. I've heard different kind of stories from different people, but you definitely can apply for a visa as a visitor. And there are many people living here. Even like one of my friends, like he lives here. He's Algerian, and Algeria and Morocco is a bit like India, Pakistan. They have this kind of friction in a way. But even he's living here. There's no problem. And what you'll find is that you can get a visa here. You can go through the process. I would say it's not as simple as, for example, Turkey. Like I said, in Turkey, I filled it out myself. You go to the appointment, it's done. I've heard it's a little bit more complicated. I think this is one of the things that kind of lets Morocco down a little bit, that the infrastructure is a lot less Western. And by Western, sadly, I mean quality-wise, right? So I don't know about you, bro. Like, I don't know what your experience was like in Turkey, but me opening a bank account in Morocco, like the first day I went to the bank and I said to the guy, I need to open a bank account, right? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. It's just the manager's not here today. Like come back after Dhuhr or something. I'll come back tomorrow after Dhuhr, right? So then I go back the next day after Dhuhr, and like the manager's, he's like, oh, they're not, he's not here again today. They come back tomorrow again, right?
Right.
And then we kind of go through this rigmarole. Even same with the opening time. Like the bank said it would open at 9:30. I stood outside at 9:30 queuing, right? No one there. 9:30, 9:40, 9:45. Someone kind of rolls in slowly, opens the back. It's that kind of vibe, right? That sometimes people associate to like inshallah bukra, right? The IBM reality of like it'll happen tomorrow type of thing. Now you compare that, like me going to the bank 4 times or 5 times to actually open a bank account compared to what happened in Turkey. I went to Kuvvet Turk and I said, I want to open a bank account. They said, take a ticket, sit there. I sat there and they said, okay, now go into that room. I went into the room. There was not a single person there. There was a screen there. There was a sister in Istanbul or wherever. And she said hello to me. She said, put your passport in here, put this document in the scanner. I did the whole thing. And then she goes to me, okay, your account is open. Collect your card from the reception now. And I was like, wow, I've never even done this in the UK, never mind like anywhere else in the world. So I think when it comes to these kind of structural governmental things, I think there's a lack there, probably similar to Egypt. And so when you go through the visa process, I think it's a bit similar, where people will say to you, yeah, if you got £5,000 in the account, it'll be okay. But then someone else will say, oh no, I did it with 10,000, or my guy said this. And so there's a little bit of that kind of culture here, I think, in different things. So when you go through the visa process, it might be a good idea to use some of the brothers and sisters that are out there doing these services. They're quite reasonable in the prices that they charge. And I think you can actually do it in a very stable kind of way. And they will handle a lot of those things. They'll do those kind of things. And that will then enable you to stay here without having to do the border runs and all of that.
To get your step-by-step guidance on relocating to the Muslim world, go to makehijrah.com/blueprint. You know, all things considered, your lifestyle, your children benefiting there, and everything else there, is that putting you off? Did that put you off at all? Like the bank account took 3 days to...
None of that stuff put me off at all. Why? Because all of that stuff is a one-time thing, right? How many times do I have to open a bank account? Once, right? And since that time, I've never had to go to the bank. I went the other day to get cash out, and the bank guy saw me, and he came out to me and said, you know, I don't know why because my name's simple, maybe. He's like, oh, Mohammed, how are you? I'm like, I saw this guy once, like, you know, like a year ago. And he's like, oh, Mohammed, how are you? This, that, and the other, right? So I'm never going to have to do the bank thing again. Same with when I went to notarize the papers or do these little things that we do, they all done once. And so there is going to be initial friction of wherever you move to. But the point is that once that thing is done once, you don't have to deal with it again. So I never, ever have to deal with the issues around the bank. I do the online banking. I do all that kind of stuff. It doesn't affect me at all. So it really shouldn't put anyone off. This is just like the normal thing, the little bit of friction you need to go through. But once you're there, and you've done it, you're not going to be affected by any of these things, really. It's only when you get into like doing certain things that you're going to find problems. Otherwise, it's very smooth.
I know something that I got used to, especially in Turkey, and that's the way that you pay the rent and pay the bills. And you have an app that you go on and you just choose the service and you just pay it like this. It was very convenient. In some other places, Egypt used to be that way. It's kind of changing now, but you would have to, a guy come to your house to get the electric. But what about Morocco? Do you have these type of services or?
This is really important because I'm like, they call me, the brothers here, they call me a city boy. Cause I'm like, I'm really into like my convenience and having things easy and comfortable for me and all this kind of stuff, right? This is one of the reasons why I love Dubai and the idea of living in the UAE, because I feel everything is super convenient, maybe too much, right? So when I came to Morocco, I was like analyzing small things and people were saying like, what's wrong with you, bro? Like these are minor things. They shouldn't be important to you for Hijrah and all that. I'm like, yeah, but for me, it was like, for example, they don't have YouTube Premium. Okay. What is YouTube Premium? Basically, I haven't seen ads on YouTube for years. Alhamdulillah. Like I never see an ad because I have YouTube Premium, right? But in Africa, they didn't have YouTube Premium. And you got to remember, obviously Morocco's in Africa, right? So they didn't have YouTube Premium in Africa. When I came here, when I used like Apple Pay, they didn't have Apple Pay in Morocco. So I was like, what on earth? Like they don't have Apple Pay, they don't have this. When I use Google Maps, like I remember I was driving to Casablanca or somewhere 3 hours so far, I realized I got no petrol left. And then I'm searching online for petrol station and they're saying the nearest petrol station like 3 hours away. And I'm like, what the hell? Right? What's going on, right? So I'm just driving like really stressed and looking for a petrol. And then I realized, oh, there's a service station here. So I stopped and I got it. And I'm like these little things, I think those are the things that kind of stress me out. But this is the beauty of it. And like when you make a change for Allah, inshallah, Allah makes it easy for you. And that's how I feel. I feel like we kind of left the benefits of the dunya and Turkey to actually come to the more Islamic side and the kind of things that I wanted to come here for in Morocco. And would you believe, as soon as I got here, a few weeks before, I think YouTube Premium arrived. They announced 10 countries in Africa, and Morocco was one of them where they're going to give YouTube Premium, right? So I have YouTube Premium. Just before we moved here, Apple Pay actually came. It's fully working here. Everything is fine, right? And then when it comes to the bills and all these things that you mentioned, I was worried about that. I hated the idea of going in the morning, going to like buy this or pay for the card. You know, the queues generally in Morocco are not good. Like if you go to the local phone shop, the first time you go for your SIM card, it might take you ages because there's like one guy working there, very slow, all that kind of stuff. So I was in the same mindset as you. I was like, how do we pay this stuff online? And what the great thing is that everything I pay for is online. So I'm talking about like my gas, electricity, even actually my gas is a cylinder, but the guys in the compound, they gave me the number for the guy who's got a shop. I just WhatsApp him and he's like, I'll bring you a cylinder and replace it and stuff. Right? So it's very convenient for that. Internet I pay online. Everything I pay basically online. There's none of this go to the post office, pay the amounts, anything like that. At the same time, they also have services. So for example, in Turkey, they had this thing called Get Here, which you guys probably know of because it was in the UK as well. And Get Here was really good. It would deliver food, groceries to your thing. Well, in Morocco, we have something called Glovo. And Glovo is something that literally, I think we use it every day. Like we're just ordering groceries, we're ordering snacks and things like that. You're ordering food from restaurants and literally they come to my door, right? And that's all done via app. You pay for it all online. So these levels of convenience, they really are there. The only thing I would say is probably there's a bit of a detriment is that Morocco is definitely more of a cash society, okay?
Right.
In Turkey, like they'll accept card almost everywhere. I went to some places in Turkey where there was a lady just like by the side of the attraction. And I said to her, I've got no money. And she said, no problem, just IBAN me the money now. But in Morocco, there's times when I've been to massive restaurants. I'm talking they've got like 150 seats in the restaurant and they're like, no, cash only. And some of them will have a cash machine in there just so they don't need to take card. So it's definitely more of a cash society here. So when you're going out and you're buying groceries and you're doing things like that, you're going to need to have cash. But obviously, if you go to like a big supermarket like Marjan, which is the main branded one here, all those places will have cards and a lot of businesses will have cards. A lot of restaurants will, but it's still a very cash-heavy society, I think.
That's a nice transition into the cost of food. Just give us everybody's food budget is different. We know that. And people like brands that are from outside the country and blah, blah, blah. Well, let's just talk about your budget if you just buy locally. Is there a big local market for, let's say, cereals or these type of things, bread, that type of stuff? Or is everything just brought in from outside?
No, like if you look at basic things like bread, like vegetables, for example, they have really great oranges, strawberries, everything that they grow here, olives, all this stuff. If you buy that kind of stuff, it's very reasonable. It's very good. Okay. But the second you start like transitioning to other things, like for example, maybe like biscuits, or they have cereals that they don't produce here, or those kind of things, then the price will shoot up and it will be more. So for example, like, you know, as English people, we love baked beans, right?
Okay.
Now, if I was to buy baked beans here, they cost like £1.50 for one tin, right? Okay. And that's probably a French brand or something that they've done in Morocco. Whereas in the UK, if I go to like a cheap supermarket like Aldi or Lidl, I can get 4 cans for £1 roughly. So anything imported here is extremely expensive. I'm talking about electricals. Like this is another benefit of being in Tangier. I've driven to Morocco 3 times. And when I drive to Morocco, I fill my car up with electrical stuff and all this stuff. I try to avoid buying all that stuff here because that is very overpriced. Anything electrical, anything imported, same with food. So if there's anything that is not produced here, it's going to be more expensive. Same with the cost of meat, all this kind of stuff. It's actually very similar to the UK. So from a food perspective, I've found here to be similar to the UK. I would say it's still cheaper. Like even when you go to a restaurant, all this kind of stuff, it's still probably 30-40% cheaper than the UK. But it's not a massive difference. I don't think that that's where you're going to make the big saving. I think you might end up spending a similar amount on food. Like you might end up, like in the UK, people might spend £200 a week on shopping, right? I think you're going to be similar here. I don't think it's that different. Of course, if you're very careful, maybe I'm not too careful, we're not too careful as a family, we order a lot from Glovo, that's always going to be a slight premium, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
If you're careful, like sometimes we would, like in the early days, there was a vegetable shop, we used to go and buy vegetables from there. And then there was a butcher's and we go buy from there. If you do it that way, of course, it's going to be much cheaper because you're going to different shops and you're trying to get the value out. But if you do it like we're doing, where you're just kind of like, okay, today we need these ingredients for lunch and dinner. All right, cool, let's just order them. Then there's always going to be that kind of premium. But what I'm saying is that in Turkey, I felt like food and everything was like much cheaper. I would say that maybe half the budget of what I would spend in the UK. They don't produce their own things, a lot of things. And so I feel like the cost of food, and this is what my friends have told me here as well, that the cost of food generally is high in Morocco. So you might find that you do spend like, you know, £600-800 a month on food.
Let's talk about the big difference. We talked about the Dunya part.
Yes.
Okay, it's cheap to live. It's okay, the food may be a little bit expensive, but it kind of balances out with everything else. Okay, now, religion. Because if you're making Hijrah, you're trying to find a better environment for your family to live. What are the benefits that you see for moving to Morocco for someone who's looking for a better religious environment?
I think one of the things we need to remember is that in the UK or in the Western countries, you are constantly bombarded with the fact that you are a Muslim and you are the other. This is a natural. I don't live there now, but every time I go there, I'm reminded of it. Like I went there in the summer and I spent weeks and long time in there, right? And what I found is the whole thing around the riots kicked off. And the riots, they were actually nothing to do with Muslims at all. But it was made to make it be about Muslims, right? So it was like someone did a crime, a horrible thing where they killed these children. And because of that, it became a Muslim thing. And I was thinking, this has nothing to do with us, but it's just because of the environment and the way they perceive us that we are basically treated like that, right? And now when I came to the UK recently, the same thing happened, this whole issue around grooming gangs and all this kind of stuff. So like every time I'm there, it's like as a Muslim, you're kind of like on edge and you feel like, you know, there's something wrong with you or there's something wrong with your way of thinking or your belief and all of this. And I think that that's one of the biggest things about being in a Muslim environment, that you just have peace and contentment being a Muslim. And there's no pressure on you that you are a Muslim. And there's no like negativity to you being a Muslim. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think that there's times when police, for example, see me, and because they see me as like a practicing bearded Muslim, they're like more easygoing with me, right? And I feel like even when I go to the shop, so I see people, they have more respect for Islam. Of course, we know about all the benefits, like hearing the adhan every day is amazing. My kids, like they hear the adhan, then they remember to pray rather than just like me always pestering them and stuff. So it's like, there's all these benefits of being there. But overall, I think it's just that feeling of being able to be yourself as a Muslim and not having those concerns, not having that pressure and all of that, you know?
So what about religious studies for yourself, for your children? Opportunities to learn or memorize Quran or learn Arabic language. I know that the Moroccans have their own accent or whatever you want to call it. So are there opportunities to learn like the classical Arabic and Quran and even Islamic sciences?
So from my understanding, I don't think there's a huge culture of it. Like, you know how Egypt is, like everyone knows, okay, you go to Cairo and within Cairo, there's this place and all the teachers are around there. And I don't think it's like that specifically, but if you want access to these things, definitely it's very, very doable and it's available. So for example, like in this compound, we have a sister who actually teaches classical Arabic. That's who my children go to learn Arabic, right? The local masajid, they actually do Quran. There are brothers who do hifz around here. There are obviously there are scholars in Tangier, there's scholars in Tetuan and all these other places, and they have classes and they have halakas and all these kind of things. So definitely it's one of those places where you can actually have a good Islamic education and you can kind of do that. Me, myself, I don't think I'm actually engaged in that so much, but I know from the brothers that I speak to and other people that there is a lot of that available. So it's just about, I think the primary thing is obviously to have the Arabic language. Once that's unlocked, then you are open to other things. So for example, there are hadith schools here, there are schools that do Quran specifically. So all of that is available for you. It's just a case of you, I think, unlocking the language. And once that's done, then everything else kind of opens up to you in that sense as well.
So what about schools for
Okay,
children?
schools is interesting. So the way we did it most of our lives is like when my kids were young, we were living in the UK, they went to a private Islamic school. So they did that in the early few years. When we decided to travel right at the start of 2019, we decided to do homeschooling because we thought we're traveling, we don't want a structure. They were young, we were thinking, yeah, let's just do homeschooling. And that's what we were doing. My wife was doing all the hard work, mashallah. She was doing all the work when it comes to schooling them and all that kind of stuff. So that was really, really good. Now, as my children are getting older, like 10, 12 years old, I thought it's good for them to have some form of structure now. So what we did recently is they are now attending British Islamic schools online, right? So they do the normal thing. They're following the British curriculum. They'll do GCSEs and all these kind of things, but they're just doing it online. So the school, for example, one of the schools is based in Ilford in East London, and he wakes up every morning, he'll get onto the class, he'll do the whole day on school, he'll do their homework, all that stuff is sent through all the kind of Google Classroom and everything. And so the main schooling is done like that. But then they also have like Quran teachers. And then I have, like I said, someone in the compound that does Arabic language with them as well. So that's kind of like the structure that we use for schooling and education.
Have you considered putting them in a school in Morocco? What are the tuition prices there?
I think you can find, it depends. Like, for example, a lot of countries, they have like this American English schools and all these kinds of, like you can go there and they're quite expensive. I think you'll be paying a few £100s per child per month kind of thing, right? But also they have local schools that you can go to. There's a few schools where they're trilingual, so they'll do Arabic, English, and French. There's a few of them available as well. And they'll be kind of like in a similar price range, where there might be £100, £200, something like that, roughly. The local schools, obviously, like you pay almost nothing if they go there, but they would need the Arabic language. It's a bit like Turkey, where you need to have a certain level of Turkish to get into, for example, a secondary school in Turkish, in Turkey. So the same thing here, that you have to have a good level of Arabic. I'm not sure, because I think deep down, I probably want them to go through the British curriculum. I probably want them to have GCSEs and stuff. So for these guys, I think it's probably that we will go through this normal procedure. We do have one school that does like O levels, A levels, the old school GCSEs kind of things here in Morocco, in Tangier as well. So that is kind of like an option as well. But I think it really depends on what you're looking to do. I think if my children were much younger and we had come here when, let's say, they were 4 or 5 years old, I would have done what I'm doing with the Arabic, let them learn the Arabic. And once they're a little bit comfortable, confident, then I would have maybe just put them in normal Moroccan schools and kind of done that. And that's what, like one of my friends who lives here, he spent like 20 years in the UK with us and all that stuff. So his older son, he's doing something similar to me, where it's a UK British school, he does it online. But then his really young son, he's just going to a normal Moroccan school because of the different ages at which they came in. So I think it really depends, like what point are you coming here at? If you're coming here with very young children, then I would actually advise that you use the systems. Obviously, you want to look for a good school, try and find an Islamic school as well. But you probably want to take them through the normal schooling system if you want to do that. If they're coming at a little bit of an older range, I think a lot of this depends, like where would they go university? Like my children, I don't think, first of all, I don't think they necessarily have to go university, but if they want to go university, I'm not sure that we would go Morocco, for example. Right? And so therefore you then have to think, well, if they're not going to go Morocco, then their level of qualification needs to match something that will get them into university, for example. So it does also depend on the long-term thing, like where are you thinking your children might be educated for university? Someone might say, for example, Turkey actually has really good universities. It's a really good place, and therefore you should learn Turkish, you should integrate fully and then go to a Turkish university. So it really depends, I think, long-term education-wise. But generally, me personally, I think the idea of homeschooling is really good, especially when your children are really young. And I think, all the way up to 7, 8, 9 years old, it's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. But then maybe when they get to the later ages, you might want to introduce school.
Many people are concerned with, number one, for themselves. Can you make a living there? Can you work there? Or should you come with maybe an idea of working remotely or starting a business? And then that extends over into our children. If we raise our children there, what are their opportunities in terms of working or doing business? What do you have to say about that?
I think the two reasons that people don't travel or don't make Hijrah or do anything, number one is finances, money, everything to do with earning a living. And number two is school and children and all that stuff. And, obviously I was in Turkey for a long time. I saw a lot of families come, and it was always wonderful when they came, because they always came with that hope, with that great, mashallah, beneficial intention for the sake of Allah, and they always came to give their families like a better life and, you know, live as Muslims, and it was always really lovely to see. But it was always sad because I always saw most of those families go back, and either it was to do with the whole money situation, or it was to do with like the kids just can't fit in. Like I had one of my friends, he basically moved here from the UK, and he was in Turkey with us, and his kids just couldn't fit into schools in Turkey, just the Turkish culture, whatever, this couldn't fit. So at the end of the day, he even bought a place, but he ended up leaving because he's like, my children are not settled. And you know, when your children are not settled, it's very hard for you to be settled there.
Right.
And so they basically just ended up moving to the UAE, and they were like, okay, we're just gonna live there. And they found that to be a much better environment because everyone in the UAE, in all the schools, they speak English. Everywhere you go, they speak English. So the children found the integration much easier there. So when it comes to like moving, I think finances is probably the biggest thing. I think the case I just gave you about my friend moving is quite extreme where the children don't get on. But generally, I think finances is the most important thing. Now, what I say when I'm in these countries, Turkey, Morocco, Pakistan, any of these places, I'm like, I cannot live here working here. Like if I was to have a normal job in Turkey, a normal job in Morocco, Pakistan, something like that, I don't think we could survive. Right? So from a financial perspective, if you're coming here, and I see it on the Hijrah group sometimes, people are talking, oh yeah, is any job opportunities there, this, that. I think it's extremely low. I'm like a guy who really believes in possibility. And I think if you put your mind to something, you can actually do it, right? But at the same time, I say the chances of you getting a good enough job that will suffice you in terms of like living here comfortably, I think is very, very low. Now, one way to do it, for example, is if you came and joined like a big hotel, international hotel range, you came in as a general manager, or you came in as a, hotel manager or something like that, maybe they might give you a package which is really good. But generally, I would say that you have to sort your money out to actually live here. And I think that I always say to people that if I was earning in liras or dirhams, I wouldn't be able to live here, right? It's the fact that I earn in pounds that I'm able to live here, alhamdulillah, right? So in the same way, I think that people need to sort their finances out. Otherwise, they go there and they try it, and because their finances are not right, they go back. Like there was one example, this really nice family, they moved in, I kind of helped them, showed them around, all that stuff. They moved in, and then they lived there, and then the husband was like, I need to go back because of work. So he would go back for work, right? And then like they had these COVID restrictions, you can't come back for 10 days, all this other stuff. Then he was there, stuck there. Then he came back, then he went back, and they just couldn't handle it. And it broke down, and then they had to kind of go, right? So these kind of situations, I think you'll see them a lot when it comes to people moving. It's great that they try, but I think having your finances in order. So for example, for me, like all my business is done online, so everything comes online. I'm not really location dependent and stuff. So if you can set something up like that, that can be really good. I've seen other people, like there was this people that I know from friends, they moved to Egypt like, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And the way they did it was very simple. They had a house in the UK, their own house. They put that on rent, and that then became their income every month. And that enabled them to do it. So it's not like you have to start a business or something. If you've got a house that you live in, that you own in the UK, you could actually just put that on rent, especially with the way rent prices are today, and you could live comfortably in different countries. So I think it's really important for you to resolve the whole financial thing. But at the other side, because I help people build businesses, all this kind of stuff, I want to say that the time that we're living in is very unique. It's so unique. It's so amazing. Like if I think about my own dad, who had a shop, if I think about what he went through to open a shop, it's kind of insane. Like he opened a shop in like the 80s or the 90s. So he would have to go to an estate agent, look at different shops, and then sign a lease agreement, and then, get the stock, and then so it might take him years to open up a shop, right? But today, literally, like my son, who's a teenager, can go on his phone and he can open up a shop by the evening. So the kind of situation we're living in now is the greatest time to make hijrah than ever time in history ever, I would say, right? Now, of course, that requires you to apply yourself, to get out of your comfort zone, to do the things you need to do. But generally, Allah has given us the means now to make hijrah like never before. So this is the time to go, right, I'm serious about this. I want to do this, and Allah will help you, inshallah.
If you would like to support our productions and share in the reward, inshallah, go to fund.makehijrah.com. One last point before we move on, the children, because that's a concern of people. Like, okay, I put them in school here, they go to university, etc. Can they continue on to live there? Like, let's say they want to live there, but now do they get the same rights as the locals? They have the same opportunities. Is it even worth going and working in a company there? You get my point. What's your strategy in terms of your children once they reach adulthood?
This is a really big question, and it's a really tough one as well, because I think it depends on different families. So I'll tell you, there's some friends I know who grew up in different parts of the world, and when they grew up, it was their mum, their dad, and their siblings in every country they lived in. That was it. Okay.
Right.
For me, when I grew up, it was me, my mum and dad, and then next door was my auntie and uncle. Further down the street was auntie and uncle. Next door to them, auntie and uncle. Next door to them, auntie and uncle. Next road, auntie and uncle. Literally hundreds of family members in my exact 2, 3, 4 mile vicinity. Okay. So that's how I've been brought up. That's how I've kind of grown up. So for me to now come here, it's very alien for me to be in an environment where I don't have huge family. I don't have all this kind of stuff. Right. And so when you kind of move here, you're kind of hoping that, yeah, you know what, you want your kids to get integrated, you want to get all this kind of stuff. But it is really tough because, like, even my kids, their cousins, their family, they're in a different country. So they naturally gravitate towards their cousins who are young and this and that. So I think this is always going to be like a big challenge for anyone that moves to a country where they've got a base back home. Because for me, the UK is still home on that level. My parents are there, my families are there. Like, I still consider it home on some level, you know? So I think it's really deep. But at the same time, this is one of the reasons why we kind of shifted from Turkey to Morocco as well. Because we were kind of like, well, we have Moroccan roots, like my children do, right? Like they're like a quarter Moroccan or whatever. And they have heritage. They can actually live here. They can get Moroccan passports, all this kind of stuff. Whereas in Turkey, it would have been, yeah, we can integrate and we can do that. But Turkish citizenship, it's not so clear. They say, yes, you can get it. It might take 10 years, 15 years. You don't know, all this kind of stuff. So with this kind of stuff, you don't really know. But this is part of the reason why we came to Morocco, because we thought the roots here are deeper. By the fact that we have, nationality, they are Moroccan, we have Moroccan family here. Like, there is a chance where they could actually settle here and be here. But I think a lot of this does depend on them and the way they are. Because I'll give you an example. Like, as children, sometimes we kind of miss what we left behind, right? So when I was 15, my parents moved me to Pakistan. We all went to Pakistan as a family. My dad wanted to move back, see what it was like. He made Hijrah in his own sense in those years, right? And it was a very different time. This is a time before the internet. So it was like crazy for me to move as a 15-year-old, leave all my friends, leave my lifestyle that I've known my whole life, to go to like a village in Pakistan, stay there for a few months, and then go somewhere else. And I really believe, by the way, that experience was amazing. And when I look back at it, it's like one of the greatest things in my life. And that's what's enabled me today, alhamdulillah, to actually live in different countries, move around, be free. Because I think I had that experience, so I was able to move around, right? But when I was there, I kind of felt like, man, I really missed the UK. And I really want to be back in the UK. And the first chance I got to go back, I basically went back to the UK and I lived there, right? And I think sometimes it's like that with the kids, where the kids, like, they enjoy now going to the UK because they see their friends, they see family, they see everyone, and it's like a holiday for them and all that kind of stuff. And you know how your mind is, like, it's like when you go to holiday somewhere, you feel like, oh man, that place is so great, I want to live there. So the future, I guess it's in Allah's hands. But from our perspective, I think the safe part is that if you can raise your children to the point where they become adults and they're comfortable as Muslims and they love Islam and they do all of this stuff, maybe it doesn't matter where they live in the end, as long as they protect their deen, their Islam. But if you do it when they're like exposed to this stuff very young and they feel like the other, maybe like we did and our generation did, then I think it could be a bit of a problem.
That's interesting, man, because I meet a lot of my children's friends, and you'll be surprised how they think of things and how they look at things, especially if they were raised here. They were raised in the Muslim world. They want to be in the Muslim world. You'd be surprised, But you mentioned earlier that you help people to do business, or you help them to grow their business. Can you go into that a little bit? Like, maybe maybe what you offer, we can benefit before we decide to go and make Hijrah, or even while we're making Hijrah, we can benefit from something like that.
Yeah, sure. So I've been doing a load of different things. So I started out in account management. I've done project management. I've done events management. I've done counseling. I've done coaching. I've done loads of different things. And I think it's like more than 10 years ago now, where I basically decided that I wanted to kind of live a different kind of lifestyle. And a lot of that was to do with like having more freedom, having more impact, trying to do things on my own terms and all that kind of stuff. And so I went out and I just started doing different businesses. I did Amazon in the early days, and I did Amazon in what I would consider the kind of, like, I would say it was like the golden era for Amazon,
Mm.
which is basically like you would put stuff up and it would just sell very easily. There was very low competition. So I did Amazon for a long time. That was really, really good. That's probably what enabled me to leave my job and become self-sufficient, alhamdulillah, right? For the first time in my life. This is like 2014, I think. And so because of that, I kind of did that. Then I did other stuff like ads and agencies and selling different products and crowdfunding. So I did like years and years of different kind of business models to basically live and have an income for most of my life. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, because I'd done so much training, I worked as head of operations for Akhirah, which is a non-Muslim dawah charity. I did a lot of work with the du'at, training them on things like speaking, communication, empathy, leadership, all this stuff. And I decided that I should do like a program on this. So I created a program. I started to basically sell it, and it did really well. And the way the program worked was I have a course which basically takes you through all the stuff you need to know in terms of improving your confidence, your communication, your action, your impact, your leadership. But then I would also do weekly coaching with these people. But what I did differently is I did weekly group coaching. So you would have like all the people from the program, like a fraction of them would come on the calls every week, right? So what that meant is that this is a business that became very scalable, because I could add on 20 people and it wouldn't create more work for me.
Right.
In the old days, when I was doing one-to-one coaching, if I had 20 more people on, I'd have 20 more hours of work. Right. So I kind of built this system where I was able to take on more clients and not have more work. And that worked really, really well in terms of like me being able to help people in terms of their confidence, communication, all these problems, but at the same time for myself to have a lot of free time. And so when I moved to Turkey, like it kind of really picked up and it did really well. That was the time when I was traveling a lot. I was just like relaxing a lot, having a lot of time for myself, because I was speaking to, my coaching clients once a week. And then I was speaking to my team maybe once a week. So the business was being run at a very good level. It was a 6-figure business that was running. It's still running, alhamdulillah. But it was running really well without so much effort, so much time. And for me, this is the optimum, because I think, like, I remember when I was in uni, I was kind of like I was time rich, because there wasn't much to do at uni in terms of modules and stuff, but I was income poor. And then when I started working, I was like income rich, but I was time poor because I was working all the time. So I think trying to find the balance between the two, I found it to be really, really good. And so the way I built this 6-figure business up myself, that's what I started to help other people to do. And so we helped other people to do the same, where they kind of chose something which was like a problem that people faced, and trying to help them to actually solve that problem for people and charge them for that. So it's like an info business. It's kind of like a course kind of business, these kind of things that I've helped other people to kind of build. I don't think it's the only model, but I thought that when I assessed all the businesses, like Amazon, for example, someone might come to me today and say, bro, should I do Amazon? And I've done Amazon. I've helped other people to do Amazon. One of the brothers I helped, alhamdulillah, he got to like over £100,000 a month per month. He was doing like millions a year for years. And then he actually exited the business, sold the business, made good money. He's someone I helped, to build that business. So I know Amazon. But if someone comes to me today about Amazon, I'm like, bro, be careful. Why? Because today to launch on Amazon, especially in the bigger markets, you might need 30, 40, 50,000 pounds to launch. And that might be a flop, by the way, right? So it's not really a beginner friendly thing, but the kind of coaching, all these kind of models that are out there, you'll be surprised that they're quite beginner friendly. Like if I said to someone, look, I'm an expert at helping people to quit drinking alcohol or quit smoking weed, for example, right? Like I can help you do that. I'll charge you, I don't know, £400. We'll have 4 different sessions, 1-to-1, and I'll talk you through the techniques. I'll hold you accountable and I'll go through it. Well, you don't actually need any money to start that. Like as soon as someone pays you, you take the money, it's high profit, and you start helping that person. So there's different models out there that you can do. I think freelancing is a really good thing to do out there as well, especially if you're trying to hone in your skills. I think there's a lot to do. I think you just need to choose, like, what is it that suits my personality? Some people are like, I don't want to be in front of the camera. Some people are like, I want to be in front of the camera. Some people are like, I want to do this kind of thing. I think you just need to focus on something, pick one thing, and then just go all in on that,
Mashallah. So where can we find you online, man?
Muslim CEO. So if you go muslimceo.com, you'll see everything related to like building businesses and stuff. But then, like I said, I have Muslim Mastery as well. If you go online, muslimmastery.com, you'll see there. We also have like free trainings that you can go through. I have over 1,000 videos on my YouTube channel. So people who don't want to pay, you don't have to pay. Like I try and do this for the sake of Allah in terms of the wider thing as well. So you can go onto my YouTube channel, Mohammad Arshad, and you could watch thousands of videos for free without paying a penny, right? So if you just want free help, you can go on there. Same with business content, everything is there. Socials are there. We're producing videos all the time. And if you want to find out more about other things, you can always just go to the websites.
Inshallah, man. Appreciate your time, bro. Inshallah, we'll definitely be in contact. Inshallah. Barakallahu feek. Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah, that was a deep dive into life in Morocco. Special thanks to our brother Mohammad Arshad for laying it all out for us. If you found this helpful, drop a like, share it with someone considering the move, and subscribe for more in-depth country profiles just like this one. Got questions? Leave them in the comments and we'll try to get them answered, inshallah.